Afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. So last week we were going through debt capital market and debt capital market instruments. We saw an introduction to what a debt capital market is and its importance. Then we moved into their participants and what were the advantages of going for a debt financing as opposed to equity financing. And then we moved into the main two types of debt capital market instruments. So we had bonds and we had debentures. Now these two, though theoretically are very different, on a day-to-day sense, there are certain texts which interchange them but understand the basic differences between these two types. What a debenture is and what a bond is. And then we moved into the several types of bonds, where we saw treasury bonds, the most famous and most commonly used type of bond issued by governments. And then you have sukuk bond. It's a more modern bond or a very new version type of a bond, which is a Sharia compliant instrument. So you have it more involved in an Islamic banking situation. Then you have corporate bonds in Sri Lanka, very less in use. You have convertible bonds as well, just like convertible debentures. You had convertible bonds. At the end of it, you are able to change the type of that instrument. Initially, it's a debt instrument. On maturity, the holder, the investor has the discretion to convert it into an equity instrument. And then we had green bonds, where the project, the underlying project for which you are trying to get the funds for is a environmental oriented project or a sustainability related project. Then the corresponding bond that you're issuing is called a green bond. We saw what is a callable and a puttable bond. This was the most significant. I wanted you to understand the difference between that, how interest rate risks and the reinvestment risk is passed on. That's important. Then we saw junk bonds and investment grade bonds, both of them more like a mirror of it. So if it's a junk bond, they are rated triple B and triple B below. Sorry, it's not triple B and below, it's triple B below. Okay. If it's triple B and above, it falls into the investment grade bond. So if a bond is triple B, it falls into an investment grade bond. But anything below that falls in the category of a junk bond. Then we saw what a floating rate bond is, what a euro bond, and what a foreign bond is. Later, we saw the risks that are associated with the bonds. When you go as an investor, what are the risks that you are exposed to? So out of this, interest rate risk is a very important risk that is faced by bondholders. And secondly, the credit risk involved. And thereafter, these are common risks that you have. Liquidity risk, even you have relating to other instruments as well. Those actually depend on the market situation. Okay, then you have exchange rate risks. If the instrument that you invested gives you the cash flow in terms of a foreign exchange. Then inflation risk, the yield curve risk is a new term that you all studied. So we saw that yield curve risk doesn't happen when there's a parallel shift in the yield curve, only in the situation of a non-parallel shift that you are exposed to such a yield curve risk. We saw an example as well. And then we had the reinvestment risk. I told you how the interest rate risk and the reinvestment risk go hand in hand. Then we moved into the types of bond issued locally in our market. We had treasury bond, which is a LKR, a debt capital market instrument issued by our government. Then we had certain other debt capital market instruments, but those were issued in foreign currency, dollars. If that instrument is issued in the domestic market in dollar terms, it's the Sri Lankan development bond that they're talking about. If it's targeting to the international market, it is the international sovereign bond. Then we saw what a Sukuk bond is. The main highlight here is the Sukuk bond is structured based on the Sharia law guidelines. Okay, so the underlying project has to be Sharia compliant. The instrument itself should be structured in a way that it is compliant to the Sharia law. So as per Sharia law, earning interest is a violation or is prohibited, because what they believe is capital being just idle is not a good way to earn a return. When it's invested, profit means you have put it into a productive resource that's earning, that's creating some betterment or creating some use to the others. So Sharia compliant, the Sukuk bond, you don't term your return as interest, it is the profit. So we saw there were several features which made Sukuk bond very much similar to an equity instrument, but one significant feature had a similarity between the Sukuk and the debt instrument. We saw that Sukuk had a maturity date, but equity instruments don't. So that specific maturity date is the common feature that you find between the conventional debt instruments and the Sukuk bond. All the other features are more or less similar to an equity instrument. You don't earn an interest, you earn a profit. So the profit depends on the performance of the underlying asset or the project. You are exposed to the performance of the underlying project. So which means the amount you invested is not what you might get on maturity. Okay. So those are the important features that you need to remember when you study Sukuk bonds. So we made it very much clear for you through this diagram. So through this table, it's a good way for you to understand and brush up. Then we move to debentures. So debentures, we saw the main features of a debenture, what makes it different to a bond. Then what were the types of bonds that are currently in use? So based on security, you have secured debentures and unsecured debentures. Based on interest, you can split debentures. Based on the redemption, whether the debenture can be redeemed at the end of the maturity or cannot be redeemed. So based on that also, you could classify debentures. Then you have a classification based on the recording involved. So if there is a record involved in it, those are called the registered debentures, where you have a debenture register to record the holder's details. So such debentures are not easily negotiable or transferable by mere delivery. But if it's a bearer debenture, where the company does not need to have a specific register to record any details of debenture holders, it allows the holder to merely transfer the instrument and get their way out of that instrument. Okay. Finally, we had classification based on convertibility. We saw this even with the bonds. Just like we had convertible bonds, here you have convertible debentures. At the time of issuing, it's a debt instrument. Until in maturity, it's a debt instrument. On maturity, the holder or the investor has the right to either convert it into equity, or he could say, look here, I don't want an equity instrument, I just want my money back. So that option is given to the holder. But a non-convertible debenture is a debenture which does not have this feature. So ideally, we're talking about a very conventional debenture there. Lastly, we saw the advantages and disadvantages of moving to a debenture from the point of view of an issuer. Okay, so from the point of view of an issuer, what is the difference for them to, what are the advantages and disadvantages for them to think of moving to a debenture than an equity instrument? So today we are going to look at bond terminology, and if time permits, we will move into valuation of bonds. Okay, so when we move into debt capital market instrument or debt capital market itself, there are certain terms that you need to be familiar with. Okay, and why I have used the word bond terminology here? Because the bond market is the larger market in a debt capital market. Okay, so now we will go through some terms that are used in this market for you to know what this term is and whether there is any calculations involved. Okay, so first is the principal amount. Okay, so what is the principal amount? It's the amount that is paid out to the holder of the bond on its maturity. So when the bond matures, you receive a particular bulk amount. That's called the principal amount. So now this does not involve the interest component. Excluding the interest, you get a particular amount which is called the principal amount. Now this principal amount is the par value of the bond or the face value of the bond. Okay, when you're issuing a bond, that bond will have a par value or a face value to it. Okay, that is the principal amount that you will get on maturity. Now you might be thinking, why I'm not wording the principal amount as the amount you invest in a bond. Now you need to be careful here, because when the lesson moves on, I'll tell you there are three types of bond. You have a par bond, you have a discount bond, and you have a premium bond. Okay, now if you want, you can note it down, or just for your understanding here. Once we move to that section, I will elaborate it for you. Okay, so if you are investing in a discount bond, what a discount bond is, now you have a face value to a bond. Now in a discount bond, you're able to buy the bond at a price below the face value. Okay, but on maturity, what do you get? You get the face value. Okay, now if it's a par bond, no issue for you. On the day you invest, is the amount you invest is the par value or the face value. So on maturity also you get your face value. All right. If it's a premium bond, what happens? On the day you invest, you will pay something more than the face value. But on maturity, you will end up getting the face value. Now you'll be wondering, why would someone pay more than the face value? Okay, now those questions we will address when we move to that part of the lesson. Just for you to know, I'll show you a graph that we have. So here you can see orange refers to a par bond, which means on investment, and on maturity, the face value is what it is. So you invest 1,000 and on maturity also you receive your 1,000. But if it's a discount bond, you would invest somewhere around 700, but on maturity you get 1,000. Okay, now there is a reason as to why this bond is issued in a discount. Those reasons we will learn. Okay, in a premium bond, what happens? You end up paying more than the par value, somewhere closer to 1,300, but on maturity you end up getting 1,000. So that's why I'm not using or defining the word principal amount from the day of investment. Okay, I'm referring to the principal amount from the point of view of a maturity date. So on the maturity date, the amount that you receive which is the face value of the par or the par value of the bond, is the principal amount. Okay. Now this principal amount is important to us. Why? Because on maturity, now this is the bulk amount that you will get on maturity. This is the face value of the instrument. Okay. And this face value is the base or the reference amount that you are going to use when you will calculate your interest amount or the coupon amount. Okay. When they calculate the amount of interest that they need to pay you, the holder, they use this principal amount or the par value or the face value as the base or the reference amount. That's why principal amount is a very important term when it comes to the bond terminology. You don't have to do any calculation here. Remember, principal amount is the par value or the face value of the bond which you get at the end of its maturity. Okay. Now, what is the issue date? Issue date is the date on which the instrument is issued. Simple as that. Okay. So, on this day, here if you can see, I have defined it as the date when the bond offering is settled, which means on that date, the instrument is released and the payment for that instrument is also done. Okay. And the payment for the instrument is also done. Now, why this issue date is important for us? Because it is from that issue date that the bond offering or that bond becomes active. Okay. It starts to accrue interest from this issue date. That's why the term issue date is very, very important for us. So understand, on this particular day, the bond has been offered and the payments for the bond offering is also settled. Okay. Or you could, there's another way for you to term it is the date from which the bond begins to accrue interest. Just for your understanding, think of it as the date from which the bond becomes activated. Okay. So from there on, the bond is valid and the bond is in active issue. Okay. So issue date is the day in which the bond offering is settled or the bond is activated. What is maturity date? Maturity date is the day on which the bond matures or the bond becomes expired. Bond ends on this maturity date. Another way for you to define it is the day in which your principal payment or your principal amount has to be paid. Okay. So maturity date is the date in which the bond ideally expires. So on the maturity date, what are the cash flows that the investor gets? It's the principal and the final coupon payment. If there is any coupon payment to be settled, that along with the principal amount is given to the bond holder. So you have two cash flows coming to the holder of the bond. Coupon rate. Now, coupon rate, the term coupon rate, so many students get confused. They think it's a different term. Okay. Understand that coupon rate, the word coupon is used relating to bonds. Okay. So it's similar to interest rate, but when it involves a bond, we don't say it's the interest rate. We call it the coupon rate. But what they mean is exactly the same. Okay. Coupon rate is the interest rate that the issuer is paying out to the bondholder. Okay. Now let's take a usual a par bond. Okay. So in a par bond, this is my issue date. Let's say, so on this date, I have issued an instrument which is worth 1,000 rupees. Okay. And I have received the payment for the 1,000 as well. And this is my maturity date. Okay. So if it's a par bond, on maturity, I will receive my face value as well. So I will receive my 1,000. Now let's say this bond is a 5-year bond. Okay. You invest 1,000 today, in 5 years time you get 1,000. What is the benefit for the holder? If there is no interest involved, he is going to lose his purchasing power, his ability. He could have spent that 1,000 on somewhere else and earned a satisfaction or a utility for him. Okay, so those are the costs that he will have to bear if he doesn't get a incremental income. So to compensate for this timing, credit risk, all other risks that he face, there is a interest component to it, where the issuer says, look here, fine, for the 1,000, I will give you, like now on amount wise, you will ask, I need 500 at least over these 5 years. Okay, so the issuer will say, okay, fine. So each year I will give you 10%. Okay, now what is this 10%? Ideally, it's the interest that the issuer is going to pay. Okay, because issuer has borrowed 1,000. Every year, the issuer will pay 100 rupees to the investor. Okay. Now, if you can see, each year meaning end of 1 year, end of 2, end of 3, end of 4, end of 5 is the maturity date. So on the maturity date, you have the final coupon payment and your principal amount. Okay. So what is the coupon rate of this bond? 10%. How do I know now? In this, I have told you directly 10%. If the 10 is not given, how do you calculate? For a year, what is the interest the issuer, the bondholder gets? Here, in this example, for 1 year, the bondholder gets 100 rupees as the coupon or as interest. What is the face value of this bond? Now, based on the face value is what? That's the base value in from which the interest is paid out. Now, what is the base value? That is the par value of the bond, which is 1,000. So we can see every year, every year 10% is paid out as interest to the bondholder or the investor. Now, this annual interest rate is the coupon rate. So, if someone gives you this question and say, what is the coupon rate of this bond? 10% is the coupon rate of this bond. So, coupon rate is the annual rate of interest. Highlight the word annual. The bond issuer pays out to the holder. Why? The bond issuer is the one who borrowed. The person who borrowed needs to pay the cost. Okay. Now this is paid on the par value of the bond. Okay. Not on the price. Okay. I want you to highlight that as well. It is based on the par value. Why do we say that it is based on the par value? Remember, I told you there are three types: discount, par bond, and a premium bond. Irrespective of these three types, you need to pay an interest. Okay. So you cannot base your interest based on the market price of the bond. You need to have some kind of a certainty, right, to your cost. So you always link it to the face value of the bond. Irrespective of what the price the investor bought, you will give your interest based on the face value of the bond. Okay. And this is paid at the each coupon payment date. Now, when there is a bond issue, they will say the coupon payment date. If it's an annual payment date, every year you will pay the payment. If it's biannual, every 6 months you will pay the payment. Okay. Now, how do you calculate this coupon rate? We just saw that total annual coupon payment amount. Okay. In amount terms for 1 year, what is the interest or the coupon that you get? Now here, over the 5 years, you got 500 rupees. That doesn't mean you take 500 divided by 1000. That is completely wrong. What you need to do is you have to take the annual. For 1 year, you only got 100. Okay. So you have 100 divided by the par value of the bond, which is 1000. So that will get you the coupon rate as 10%. Now, always it is expressed as a percentage, and it's a percentage based on the par value or the face value of the bond. Now, this coupon rate can be a fixed rate or a floating rate. Now, in this example, it's a fixed rate. You can say it doesn't change. Across the 5 years, it remains as 10. The issuer has another option where the issuer can say, look here, I can't issue 10. I will link it. I need a floating coupon. So he would say, if this is Sri Lanka, he will say, I will issue you AWPLR plus 1%. Okay. So this is a floating rate. Why is it a floating rate? If AWPLR increases, then the interest rate also increases. Okay. So it's a floating rate. Depending on how the AWPLR moves, your rate, your all-inclusive rate will also change. Okay. Now let's see what this fixed rate bond and what is this floating rate bond. Now, if you take fixed rate bonds, those are the most common type of bonds that you find. Why? You know, bonds are the fixed income earning securities. What is fixed income earning securities? You can anticipate, you could calculate with certainty the return that you are going to get. Okay, that's one of the specialities or the important features when it comes to the debt capital market. If you want high return which has high volatility, then you go to equity market, because there you never know the return that you will get. Dividend also it varies, and capital gain also varies. When it comes to coupon or when it comes to the bond market, you call it the fixed income market, because with a reasonable stability, you can ascertain one kind of an income that you will get. Okay, so fixed rate coupon is one of the mostly used in type of a bond. Now, we saw this last week as well when we saw prospectus. I hope it's clear for you. You can see out of the 4 types, you mainly have fixed rates. Just one particular type is a floating rate that is involved. So you can see even here, the highly used type is the fixed rate. Okay. Now, the price of a fixed rate coupon bond fluctuates more in the market whenever the interest rate, the market interest rates change. Okay. Why? Because this bond has a fixed interest. That is, now we know whenever we know that the price of a bond and the interest rate are inversely related. So whenever the interest rate increases, price of the bond declines. When the interest rate declines, price of the bond increases. Okay. But now this degree of fluctuation is very high when it's a fixed rate coupon bond. Okay. Why? Because depending on the market rate, your bond will either become very favorable to the market participants or very unfavorable to the market participants. Okay. So depending on that, the price they're willing to buy your fixed rate coupon bond will differ. Now I have a simple example to tell you. Now assume that you are holding a bond which has a face value of 1,000 rupees. Okay. Now that bond gives you the right to earn 5% as the annual coupon payment. All right. So 5% meaning you get 50 rupees each year. Now let's say when you have invested in this bond, but the current market price or the current market interest rate for other bonds which are very much similar to what you're holding is only 3%, which means others who have invested in similar bonds like yours only earn 30 rupees a year. But you, because you invested in this kind of bond, you are getting 50 rupees a year. Now, won't the others like to buy your bond? Yes. Will you want to sell your bond? No. So the demand is higher, the supply or the willingness to sell is low. Ideally, what happens? The price of your bond in the market is going to increase. So many people want to buy it, but very less people are selling it. Ideally, then the price of your bond will increase. Now, your price increases because the market rate is low. Let's say market rate increases to 7%, which means now all the others are earning 70 rupees for a year. Okay, but you are only earning 50 rupees per year. Will the others want to buy your bond? No. So the demand is low. Are you willing to sell your bond? Yes, I want to sell this 50 rupee earning bond for a year and invest in a 70 rupee earning bond. Okay, so you are willing to sell, others are not willing to buy. So supply is high, demand is low, which results in the price of your bond to decline in the market. So when the interest rate is high, price of your bond is now going to decline. Okay. Now this is the way the inverse relationship works. Now this is very, very high to a fixed rate bond. Now, let's say you are holding the fixed rate bond and there is someone else holding a floating rate bond. Now, if it's a floating rate bond, we know it's involved with a benchmark. We say AWPLR. Okay, let's see how the AWPLR is this week. It has decreased to 5.59. Now, let's say somewhere around here, so around 8%. Now you have a floating bond that is based on AWPLR. The coupon rate is AWPLR plus 1%, which means let's say AWPLR is 8, you will get 9%. Now, what is this AWPLR? It reflects the market ongoing rate. Okay, so when the market rate is increasing, that means let's say from 8 it goes to 9, are you at a disadvantage as a floating rate bond holder? No. If it's 9, your rate is also now going to increase to 10. Why? If the AWPLR increases, plus 1 is yours, 10. Now let's say market interest rates decline from 8. Now it's coming to 6%. Then you end up getting plus 7. So either way, you are protected. According to the rate increase, rate changes, your bond will also, your price of your bond will also change. But it won't be a drastic change as a fixed rate bond. Why? In a fixed rate, the coupon doesn't change at all. But in yours is a floating. When the market changes, your coupon is now reflecting that change. Okay, because of that, the floating rate bondholder is at a benefit. The floating rate bondholder is not exposed to such a high fluctuation as a fixed rate coupon bond. Now we saw what a floating rate coupon bond is. Another term that they use for a floating rate coupon bond is floating rate notes. If it's a bond which has a floating coupon, you call those bonds a floating rate notes. Okay. Now this coupon or their interest is based on some kind of a benchmark rate or some kind of a reference rate. So you have a reference interest rate plus, or it can be a minus the margin. Okay. So ideally how it would go is, you will either have AWPLR plus 1% or you have AWPLR minus 2%. So whenever AWPLR increases, the end result of this will also increase. That's how the floating rate note or the floating rate coupon bond works. Same here. Now here, but what happens when the AWPLR increases, the resulting will also increase, but by a small amount because it's a negative. Okay. Here the coupon is pegged to a benchmark rate. Example, LIBOR. So if you have a dollar borrowing, if it's a foreign US dollar denominated bond, usually you use LIBOR as your benchmark rate. So that plus or minus a particular margin. Now remember, this margin varies from bond to bond. Now it depends on the credit risk of the issuer ideally and all other reflection of all other risks. Okay. Now the frequency of reviewing this benchmark rate depends on the time period of the benchmark rate selected. Now, yes, here we say AWPLR, but are we going now? We know that AWPLR is continuously changing. Okay, so are we going to review it daily? Are we going to review it weekly? Are we going to review it monthly? Do you get what I'm saying now? Here you can see, if you take this diagram, every week the AWPLR is changing. Okay, so the issuer has the discretion when they are issuing to decide whether they are going for a weekly review, whether they are going for a monthly review, or a biannual review, or a yearly review. Based on that, the fluctuation happens. Now, for you to decide this frequency period, usually you have now this AWPLR, you have certain frequencies in which it will get reported. If you see this, you have a weekly AWPLR. Every week they calculate the AWPLR and announce it. Then you have a monthly AWPLR. And then you have a 6-month AWPLR. Now, let's say you have used AWPLR as the floating rate for your bond, but you have used the 6-month AWPLR. So when do you review it? You will review it ideally after 6 months. Now here, if you can see, if you, let's go back. Okay, let's say we use 9.59. They will keep reporting, but you will again go back and review in November. After 6 months, you will pick up the rate. Okay. If you use a 6 months AWPLR, that is a reflection of the 6-month averages. Okay, so again you will check again after a 6 months period. That's what we have mentioned here, the frequency for you to review this benchmark rate. That depends in the time period in which you are selecting. If you are using a 6-month LIBOR rate, you will review it in the end of the 6 months. Let's show it diagrammatically. Okay. Now, let's say this is your issue date. Okay. So, your issue date, you're issuing a floating rate bond. Your floating rate is 6 months. Sorry. 6 months LIBOR plus 2%. Okay. So, on your issue date, remember, is the day from which you are going to start accruing your interest. So from this date onwards, every day interest is going to get accrued. So you need to decide your interest rate when you're issuing. So on the issue date, you will pick up the 6-month LIBOR available. Let's say the 6-month LIBOR available. Now this is the 1st Jan. Let's say 1st Jan 2021. Okay, 2020, let's say. So you will use the 6-month LIBOR, let's say available is 1%. So that plus 2, 3% is your rate. Now this 3%, if this is 1 year, for the 6 months, you will fix this 3%. You won't change this 1% 6-month LIBOR. You won't review it again. When are you going to review it? You will review it on 30th June 20. So, you know, from 1st of July onwards, you have to have a new interest rate or the new interest. Therefore, you have to check what is the currently available 6-month LIBOR. So, after the 6 months period, again, when you check, now you have 6-month LIBOR as 2%. Then, your interest rate valid is 4%. Like that, you decide it on the beginning and it is valid for the 6 months, and the payment based on this interest happens at the end of the 6 months. I want you to understand that timeline. Okay? Understand how that timeline works. Let me again repeat it to you. If you are issuing on 1st Jan 2020, and then it's not clear. Let me erase it. Okay, 2020. Let's say the 6-month LIBOR is 2%, and then on 30th 6th 20 you have 4%. Ideally this should be 31st. Why? Because if you are going to issue on the first itself, or always when the interest rate is issued, there is a lag effect. Why? What I mean by lag effect is, now look here, they say on the 5th 5.59, but yesterday when you opened up market, this interest rate was not there. In the evening is when they announce. So this interest rate you can only start using from Monday. Okay, so there is a lag effect involved. So you will use the 31st December day rate, which is 2%. So on the issue date, you will use this 2% plus 2%, which is 4%. Sorry, okay, 4%. So this 4%, let's assume this is the 6 months. The 4% is valid for these 6 months until 30th June 2020. Okay. All your interest will get accrued in this 4%, and at the end or in June, your interest is paid out to you at 4%. Then again, you will review the LIBOR rate. Currently, LIBOR is 4%. 4 plus 2 is now 6. So from June till 31st December 2020, you will have 6% as your interest rate. So July, August, September, October, all your interest will get accrued at this 6%. And at the end of the period, you will get your money paid out. Why I am explaining you this timeline so elaborately is, in your MCQ always they test this. They say on beginning of the coupon period, now this is the coupon period, okay? When we come to that term, I will tell you. Beginning of the coupon period, interest rate was reviewed on 30th June 2020. When will this interest payment be paid out? So if the interest is reviewed on 30th June 2020 and it's a 6-month coupon free period, we know on the 31st December 2020, the payment will be done. That timing is very, very important for you to understand. For example, coupon rate of a bond may be priced at 6-month LIBOR plus 2%. This means at the end of every 6 months, the rate of the following period will be decided on the basis of LIBOR at that point plus 2% spread. Unlike fixed rate bonds, which have an inverse relationship with interest rate, floating rate notes protect investors from increase in interest rate. Why am I saying protect? Because we saw in our earlier example, when the interest rate increases, market rate increases, your income is also going to increase. But in a fixed rate bond, that didn't happen as such. Even if the market rate increases, your income was fixed. So you are at the losing end. In a floating rate, you are protected from the market rate increase. Even though there is an increase, nothing is going to, it won't impact you as much. Why? You are also going to get a higher income. Current yield. Now, current yield. Now, when the term yield is used, I told you, we are always referring to a return. Understand? Yield means your return. How much are you receiving? Return is the term that you should keep in your mind when you see the term yield. Okay. Now, current yield meaning at the current moment, what is the return from this bond to you? That is what is referred to by current yield. Okay. What is the return that you earn currently from the bond? Now, when we talk about a return, we always talk about on an annual basis. So, for a year, you will see the year's return compared to today's price. How much is the return on a percentage basis that you are getting? Okay. So, how do you calculate the current yield? You still take your annual coupon payment for a year. How much are you receiving as coupon payment? And you will divide that now by the current market price. Why? You are looking at the current yield. Currently, if I buy it today, what is my return? Currently, what kind of a return am I getting? Okay, so think of this situation now. Today, you see a bond being traded, the bond price you know, and you know the details of the coupon. You are now assessing, if I buy this bond at this price, I will earn coupon for 1 year of this amount. So what will be my return based on today's price? Okay, therefore that only we use current yield. Now remember, current yield and the coupon rate formula are similar except for the denominator. Coupon rate is total annual coupon payment. The numerator is same as the current yield. You have total annual coupon payment. Okay, that is same. But denominator here is current market price. But in coupon rate, it was par value of the bond. Okay. So there's an example given here for you to help understand. If a bond has a par value of 1000, pays 80 rupee as annual coupon, and has a market price over as 1032.25. What is the current yield of the bond? Now here you can see this is a premium bond. Why it's a premium bond? In the market, you can buy this bond only at 1032 rupees. But the par value on maturity you're only going to get 1000. You are paying a price which is more than the par value. Okay. So how do you find the current yield? You know what is the year's coupon that you're getting? 80 rupees divided by current market price, which is 1032. So this will get you the current yield at 7.75%. What will be the current yield if the market price changes to 969.75, which means now the price has declined. Now the bond is a discount bond. You buy it today at 969, but on maturity you are going to get 1000 rupees. So it's a discount bond when you compare the par value and the market price. So how do you calculate the current yield? Simple, 80 annual coupon payment divided by what is the current market price? 969.75. So that will get you a current yield of 8.25. Now you can see when the market price or the bond price in the market reduces, the current yield increases. Why? Because now earlier to get 80 rupees for a year, you had to pay 1032 rupees. Okay, you have to invest 1032 to get 80 rupees as your return. But now to get 80 rupees, you only have to pay 969 rupees. You have to pay a lesser amount to get the same benefit. So by paying a lesser amount, you are going to get a higher return. Okay, so when the bond prices decline, the current yield increases. Okay, but was the coupon rate changing when the bond price changes? Did we say any change? Did we see any change like that? No. Why? Irrespective of whatever happens in the market, even though the bond price changes, your coupon rate is not going to change. Okay, coupon rate is already predetermined. Here I'm referring to mainly about a fixed rate coupon. Okay, so whatever happens to your bond price, your coupon rate will remain unchanged. But any change in your bond price is going to impact your current yield of the bond. So we can say current yield of a bond is inversely related to its price. Okay, just like the inverse relationship between interest rate and price. Coupon frequency or coupon period. What do you mean by this? This is how often are you going to pay the coupon? Okay, now look at this example. This is payable semi-annually. This is payable monthly. This is also payable semi-annually. This is also payable semi-annually. So how often are you going to pay your coupon is what a coupon frequency or the coupon period means. It can be per month, 6 months or 12 months, 1 year. Okay, depending on the issuer's preference, the frequency can change. Okay. Accrued interest. Now, this is a very important term that you have in the bond terminology. What is accrued interest meaning? Let's get a good graph. Okay. Now let's say this is a 3-year bond. Okay. 3-year bond, and the coupon payment is done every 6 months. So which means you have the first coupon. Now, if this is your issue date, the date you are issuing, do you give any interest? No. That's the day in which the coupon is become, so bond is become activating. Okay. So this is your first coupon payment. You have your second coupon, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Correct now? So in 3 years, every 6 months is your coupon payment. So you have 6 coupon payments coming in. Okay. Now on the day you are issuing, from this particular date, first 20, every day this bond is earning a interest. Am I correct? Every day, because you have already lent out your money. Every day you earn your interest. Okay. You will keep earning that, and you will reach the total 6 months value on that particular day. So on this date, what happens? Okay, you have, this is the payment date. So the entire payment is done. From thereafter, again, accrued interest will become 0. So again, from the next coupon payment date, from next coupon period, every day, interest will start to get accumulated. Then again, on the coupon payment date, the payment will be made. Okay. Now this amount that you earn every day from the date of issuing the bond or from the date of last paying a coupon is called the accrued interest. Every day you are earning a interest. That is the fundamental premise. Why are you earning interest every day? Because on the issue day, you have paid out the entire amount. Okay. So for that entire amount, from the day you pay, interest has to start getting billed. Okay. It has to start getting accrued. Now you would have paid, you would have said, look here, every month I'm going to pay you interest. So on the 31st of this month, if you are going to pay interest, every day on the first you will get interest amount, on the second you will get. So what happens is it will start building. So the graph will move like this. On the first day you get 1 rupee. Let's say one day you get 1 rupee. So day 1, 1 rupee. Day 2, total accrued interest is 2 rupee. Day 3, 3 rupees. Like that, every day it will start to accumulate. Okay. Now let's say this is 31st January 2021. So now let's say every month you are paying 5 rupees. So you have reached 5 rupees on this date. Okay. Once you reached 5 rupee on this day, what happens? Now this becomes now this is your coupon payment date, right? So on this day, whatever accrued interest, you will pay to your holders. So 5 rupees completely paid out, and on 1st February, what happens? There is zero accrued interest. Why? All the accrued interest was paid out on 31st Jan. So again from February, every day interest will start to get accumulated. Like, okay, that is what you call accrued interest. Okay. Accrued interest, each passing day, the bond is accruing interest. So the interest is earned by the investor daily, but the payment is done periodically. Depends on the coupon frequency or the coupon period. So that on that end of that period, you will get your coupon payment. What is accrued interest? Interest which is accumulated since the principal investment. So here you can see, since the principal investment, the amount that you are accruing, or since a bond's last interest payment. So here you have paid out your interest and then nil. So since this date, if you start accruing interest, that is also called the accrued interest. Okay. How do you calculate the interest accrued amount? Simple. First, you need to know the interest. Correct? First, you need to know the interest. So what is the interest? How do you calculate interest? Same way, you are going to calculate the coupon amount. You have the face value and now you are going to multiply it by the coupon rate. But remember, coupon rate reflects the rate that is paid for a year. Now 10% means for a year, you're going to get 100 rupees. But if your coupon frequency is different, if you are going to be paid every 6 months, that means for a year, frequency of payment is only twice. So every 6 months, you're going to get only 5%. Okay, that's why we'll take the annual coupon rate. We take the annual coupon rate and divide that by the coupon frequency. So you can get the interest for that particular coupon period. Okay. Now after you get the interest for that particular coupon period, now you have to find for one day how much is my coupon. So you will divide that by the number of days in the coupon frequency period. So when you divide it, you will get for a day how much of an interest you are earning. Okay. Now do you need to know one day interest? No, you need to know the interest accrued. So you need to know how many days have gone since the last coupon payment or since the principal investment. So you take those number of days, multiply it by the per day interest accrued, you will get the total accrued interest of the bond. Okay, this is the elaborate formula. Now, what is tricky here is they have given number of days here. So there is a day count which is involved. Okay. Now, when you have a day count, it differs from person to person. Certain people will take the actual day count. Like, let's say if it's a leap year, they will take correctly with February as 29 days. Some people will want to ignore that. Let's say it's complicated. Let's just assume that every month has only 30 days and do the calculation. Okay. So the number of days is an important factor when you're going to calculate the interest accrued. Therefore, you have certain day count conventions or methods for counting days. Okay. If your question says calculate accrued interest based on actual to actual day count, which means they want you to calculate the actual day count since the last coupon payment divided by the actual day count in the coupon frequency. That's why they say actual slash actual. You need to get the actual dates in the numerator and in the denominator as well. Okay. Now there's another way for them to represent this actual versus actual. They can say actual versus 365L, which means if it's a regular year, we assume it has only 365 days. If it's a leap year, assume that it has 366 days. Now there's another convention where they use 30 over 360, which means you assume every month has only 30 days. Every year has only 360 days. Now that's very, very easy for you. You don't have to keep calculating. Just, every month is 30 days. Do your simple calculation. Some questions might ask you to calculate it based on actual versus 365. Which means number of days since the last coupon payment, you will calculate the actual day count. But when you are dividing the number of days in coupon frequency, you will assume that in a year, there is only 365 days. You will disregard about the leap year calculations. Okay. These are the 3 widely used day count convention. But if everything else is silent in your question, you have to remember, you have to write it down. You have to say you have used actual/actual day count convention in this question. This is the default one that they use. Okay. An investor who sells a bond with accrued interest will not receive that interest until the next interest payment date, which will occur after the sale. Now, what they're talking about is in this kind of a situation, now payment happens on this date, correct? Okay. So payment happens on that coupon frequency date. Okay, that is denoted by this dark blue. But let's assume you are the holder of this instrument right now, but you have some money emergency and you need to sell this instrument immediately. Okay, so you are going to sell this instrument on this particular date. Okay, on this date, you are going to make your sale. Now, what happens is, as the holder of the instrument, when you sell, is the issuer going to pay you interest? No. Issuer is going to pay interest only on this particular date. Now, there can be hundreds of investors, correct? Therefore, the issuer might not know whether you're selling, who is holding, and everything. He knows on 30th June that he needs to pay the coupon payment. But you are selling on 31st March. He is unaware. So when you are selling, you are not going to get any interest. You are not going to get the interest, especially which is going to paid in June. But you had this instrument for 3 months of that period. Okay. But because you're selling before the coupon payment date, you're not going to get that coupon payment. Okay. So to compensate the seller, because seller has been holding this for 3 months now. So to compensate the seller, the new buyer of this instrument, let's say you were holding this instrument and you're going to sell it on 31st March. And I am the new buyer. Okay. Now I buy this on 31st March, and on 30th June, I get coupon payment. But I held it only for 3 months. But the coupon payment I am getting is for a 6 months period. Is it fair? No. So what happens is, at the time of sale, you will tell me, look here, interest is going to get paid in June, which will have 6 months interest, but I'm not going to get any interest. Therefore, the new buyer, you pay me that 3-month interest. Okay. So the new buyer who is going to get the 6-month interest all at once after the sale is obliged to pay the seller any accrued interest at the time of the sale. Okay. So who will pay the accrued interest? The buyer will pay the accrued interest. Why? Buyer is the one who will get that accrued interest on the payment date, not the seller. Okay. So that is very, very important. There was even a past paper question on this. Okay. So investor is losing the accrued interest. On the other hand, the buyer is gaining accrued interest for a period that he didn't even hold. Okay. Therefore, when there is a sale, the seller can ask, look here, you pay accrued interest for me until this date. Okay. So if the price of the sale includes this accrued interest, you call this price the dirty price. Okay. Why do you call it the dirty price? Because it includes the additional interest accrued as well. But if it only includes the principal amount without any accrued interest, then you call it the clean price. Okay, bronze clean price is the price which doesn't include the accrued interest. If it includes the accrued interest, you call it the dirty price of the bond. Okay. Then we have yield to maturity. Now, yield to maturity is another very, very important term in the bond terminology. Again, the word yield refers to the return. Okay. So here we are talking about the rate of return a holder or investor gets by holding a certain instrument until its maturity. Until its expiry, you are going to hold these instruments. So if you're going to hold it until then, what is the annual return that you will receive? Now that is depicted by the yield to maturity rate. Okay. So total rate of return an investor receives on a bond if the bond is held until its maturity date. So what's given is you need to hold it until maturity, then the return that you will get is what is highlighted in the YTM. Now, what are the return from a bond? You will get coupon. All this is coupon payment. Okay. And then on maturity, you will get your principal as well. So all this is the cash flow that you will get from a bond. So when you include all this, the YTM reflects the rate of return to the investor. So that's why we say it includes the purchase price, expected coupon or cash flows over its life, the return of principal when the bond matures or redeemed. Okay, so you have your coupon payment included, return of the principal, and the issue price. Because why issue price is important? If the issue price is less than the par value, there is a return there as well. If it's higher than the par value, there is a deduction there as well. If it's same as the principal, there is no much of a return involved. But you have to consider the time value of money here. Why? Because this is more than 1 year. Cash flow comes in a longer tenor. Okay. YTM is considered a long-term bond yield, but it is expressed as an annual rate. So if someone says 3% YTM on every year, on average, you will get 3% is what it's showing. Okay. Now a required rate of when a person wants to go for a bond, when they are from a treasury bond and a treasury bond, you will get a coupon rate, correct? Treasury bill you won't. Now the coupon rate that you get from a treasury bond reflects the risk-free rate. Okay. So not only the coupon rate, if you take the YTM of a treasury bond or yield to maturity of a treasury bond, that reflects the risk-free involved, the risk-free return. But of a bond, standalone corporate bond, it will be higher than the treasury bill. Okay. So YTM involves a risk-free component and a risk premium as well. If it's a treasury bond, the risk premium is nil, only risk-free rate. But if it's a corporate, there is a risk premium and a risk-free rate as well. Okay, so on yield to maturity, if you calculate the yield to maturity, when you discount the future cash flows of the bond using this particular interest rate or the YTM rate, you will know that the present value of the future cash flow is equal to the market value of the bond. That is how you are going to identify whether the bonds traded in the market is overpriced, underpriced, or correctly priced. Okay, how do we know that? By using YTM, when you discount the present cash flows or present value of the future cash flows of the bond, you will get the price of the bond. Okay, so if the bond is correctly priced, the present value of future cash flows should equal to the market value of the bond, which means there is no any change. But if there is a difference, let's say market value of the bond is very, very low at the moment, but present value of the future cash flows is higher, which means the bond is actually worth, let's say 1,000 rupees, but in the market it's currently getting traded only at 800 rupees, which means, look here, this bond is underpriced. Same thing, if the current market bond value of the bond is higher than the present value of future cash flows, it is overpriced. Present value is only 1,000, but in the market, if you're going to buy this bond, you have to pay 2,000. Not worth. Why? You're going to pay 2,000 for a 1,000 valued cash flow bond. Okay. So YTM is instrumental in that as well. And what you need to know is the bond yield to maturity is inversely related to its price. We know that as always. Why? Yield is the return. We saw that even with the current yield, if the price that you're going to pay for a security is increasing, obviously the return that you're going to get is also low. Why? You're going to compare your investment to your return to see the yield rate. Correct? So if your investment is decreasing and you're getting a higher return, then you will get a higher yield. Okay. So the price is inversely related to the bonds yield. Finally, we have covenants. Now, what are these covenants? I told you even when we went through debt financing advantages and disadvantages, there is less interference into business matters is a benefit. Why? Because on a shareholder level, as a owner, the investor or the holder of a debt instrument cannot influence. They cannot influence companies' decision making. Okay, they cannot say, they can't involve in a board meeting and give their opinion. But now, if now that is obstructed, no, they can't give their opinion. But what is the disadvantage? Then the company can run the business in any way they want. But whose money are they playing with? They are playing with the debenture investors' money. So there is another way that the investor or the holder of the debenture can influence by using covenants. Now, what are these covenants? Covenants are terms made by the borrower to protect investor interest. Okay, so if I'm the one who's borrowing, simple as this. Now let's say you, when you go to your mother or your father to borrow some money to go out, you will give all kinds of promises. Now you will say, I will come at 7 o'clock, I will come at 8 o'clock, I won't spend more, I won't go here. Just like that, what happens here is, when the borrower is coming to borrow funds, he will make some claim and say, look here, I understand your interest is important, but I promise to do these things. I promise not to do these things. Okay. So these promises or the terms of offering is what we call the covenants. Now these covenants can take two ways. It can be a positive or affirmative covenant, or it can be a negative or restrictive covenant. Now what is a positive covenant? Those are, yes, I will do this kind of a covenant. Okay, that means you are, as a borrower, you have to perform. You say, I will do this for you. Example, when you are issuing a bond and collecting money, you will say, look here, this money I will use only for these purposes. Okay, I will issue my statements correctly on time. I will ensure that my factory is insured. You are giving promises mentioning that you will do these terms and conditions. Those are called positive or affirmative covenants. Okay. Another type is the negative or restrictive covenants. What are those? Those are the terms and conditions that you agree not to do. Okay, or terms and conditions that you're not allowed to break. You're not supposed to do this. So ideally, negative or restrictive meaning you cannot do this. Okay, so positive is you should do, positive way of thinking. Negative is you shouldn't do these matters. For example, you come and borrow 1 billion. At that time you say, I won't borrow again for another 2 years. So that's a negative covenant. I will not borrow. Okay. Then you might have certain financial ratios which you will say, I will not breach them. Okay. Now, when it comes to financial ratios, there is a tricky. There you have to read the covenant to understand whether it's a positive or a negative. Okay. Certain covenants will say, we will maintain this particular rate. Okay. This particular current ratio, this particular net profit. That means it's positive. We will maintain. Okay. But if the covenant says, we will not breach, we will not allow interest covenant to go beyond. Okay. So if they word it as that, it becomes a negative covenant, which means you will not allow it to go beyond this. Okay. So that is what, when you're using a financial ratio to give as a covenant, you have to be careful the way you are terming. Okay, so in a negative way, you will have some kind of a maximum or a minimum involved. You will say you will not allow your gearing ratio to go beyond 2, which means you cannot let it go beyond 2 at all. You won't let your interest covenant to go beyond this rate. Okay, so those are the restrictive covenant. Then you might have certain disposal restrictions as well. When you're coming to borrow, the investors might say, because they don't have any particular say no on the business, so they will say, look here, you can't sell these assets until you pay off our investment or until maturity of this debenture. Okay, you cannot change your ownership. So that's another tricky way. Now what they could do is they will borrow money from you. 2 years down the line, they will sell the business to someone new and get out. So usually the debenture holder or debenture investors will impose this to say, look here, until the debenture is paid off, you cannot change your ownership. Okay. Or they might even have certain covenants which will restrict paying dividends to the shareholders. They will say you cannot pay dividends to the shareholders for the next 3 years. Okay, so those kind of clauses are negative or restrictive covenants. Now we move to bond valuation. Now bond valuation, having learned all these terms, will become little more easier for you. Why? You understand the basics behind these terms. Okay. Now when you are going to value a bond, when you are going to value any instrument, what you will ideally do is you need to know the cash flows relating to this instrument. Okay, that is rule number 1. You need to know your cash flows for you to value this instrument. Now, when you're issuing a bond, what is the agreement that you enter into with the investor or the holder? You agree to pay coupon payments on specific coupon payment dates, and you agree to repay the principal or the par value on the maturity date. Okay, so now this will tell you that there are 2 types of cash flows involved. One is the periodic interest payment, which is called coupon. It is called coupon, but it is periodic interest payment. What is the other one? It is the principal repayment of the investment, which happens on the maturity date. Okay. These are the 2 cash flows relating to a bond. Now, if I am drawing it in this case, these are the inflows. If I am the bond holder, I will get all this as my inflow. Okay. Now, how do I value my bond? What is the result of my bond valuation? When I value something, which means, now let's say this bottle, when I value it, what do I learn? I learn how much that this is worth, which means I will understand the real price of this instrument. Okay. So bond valuation is now going to tell me what is the real price of this bond. Okay. Therefore, I'm not going to use the price which I'm paying to buy this bond. I'm not going to use that. Why? From bond valuation, I'm trying to find this price. Okay. That's why I'm focusing on my 2 cash inflow streams. If not all together, what are the cash flows involved in a bond? You will invest certain component, in a year you will get your coupon payment. On the end of the maturity, you will get your principal payment. 3 cash flows. But in a bond valuation, what is your motive? You are trying to value the instrument. You're going to see what is the true worthiness or the true price of this bond. So you will not consider the initial investment. You are going to now see how much is it actually worth. That's why I'm using the 2 cash inflow terms. Okay. Now, these inflows are happening in a future date. Correct? Now, I am right here. Okay. This is my so I am currently on this date today on the issue date. So if it's a 3-year bond, I am now in 1st January 2020, and this bond will mature. When is it going to mature? This is 31st 20, then you have 31st 21, and this is 31st 22. So on this particular date it will get matured. So you have 3 years involved. Okay. Now what is going to happen? You are now going to earn your cash inflows in a staggered manner. Why is it staggered manner? Now this is in the future. No? For the next 3 years, you're going to get it part by part. So in June, you will get certain amount. In December of 2020, you will get a certain amount. Like that, you get it only in parts. Now standing today in this position, you are going to value. Now let's say in June, I'm going to get 50 rupees. Is this 50 rupees, does it have the same value that it has today? No. Involving inflation, the 50 rupees I'm going to get in 6 months will have a lesser value than what I have today. That we know that. Okay. Then you will get another 50 in, from this point, if you see, from 1 year's time. What about the value of this in terms of today? That is going to be even lesser than the June one. Why? In 1 year's time, getting 50 rupees, that is going to have a lower value than what I'm going to get in 6 months' time. Usually, as an investor, what is your motive? You want to get money as quickly as possible. Longer it takes, longer the uncertainty. So, when you're going to value something, when you're going to find the price of this bond, you can't just add all the cash inflows. You have to find the today's value of that future cash flow. How do you find today's value? You are going to use this concept called time value of money. Okay. You will use time value of money. What is this time value of money? It tells you, look here, You might have 100 rupees today in your wallet. Okay, using that 100, you can go and buy, let's say, 2 toffees today. But 6 months down the line, when you go in June to buy with the same 100, you might be only able to buy only 1.5 toffee. Okay, if you go again with the same 100 in December, you might only be able to buy 1 toffee. So the 100 rupee is much valuable to you today, the 100 that you have today, than the 100 that you're going to get in the future. Why? In the future, you know, inflation can increase, price levels can move up, goods and services will be much more pricier. Therefore, money that you have today is of high worth than in the future. That is what is given or advocated by time value of money. Now, using this time value of money concept, I'm going to use that concept to the two cash inflows and find the bond's value or price of the bond as of today. Okay. Now, to use this, we have 4 steps. Firstly, you need to calculate what you need to know your cash inflows. Correct? You need to know your cash inflows. What is the first cash inflows that you are going to have? You are going to have the coupon or the interest payment. So you need to know for one coupon period, not for a year, just for one coupon period. So if you are going to pay your coupon every 6 months, for one 6-month period, how much is the coupon that you are going to get? So first you need to calculate that. So how do you calculate that? You have the face value or the par value, multiply that by the coupon rate, divide it by the coupon frequency. Okay, now here, when you use the term coupon frequency, remember that depends on how frequently you are going to get the interest. Okay, so if you are going to get the interest in 1 year only once, which means annual coupon payment. Okay, you are going to get interest for the bond in 1 year only once, then your coupon frequency is 1. So if it's annual, coupon frequency is 1. If you are going to get it biannual, which means in a year, you are going to get your coupon twice. Frequency is 2. Okay, how often you are going to get is what is referred by the coupon frequency. So if it's biannual, your coupon frequency is 2. Let's say monthly. For a year, every month you're going to get your coupon, which means how frequently are you getting coupon? 12 times. So your frequency becomes 12. Okay, if you can just write it down on the side. So step 1 is for you to identify the coupon payment. Okay. Now secondly, now here let's go for a much clear platform. Okay, so here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so first step is for you to know the coupon payment amount. So let's say 50 rupees is what you get every 6 months. So for a year, you got 100 rupees. So we know that. That is step number 1. Now, what is the actual value of these 50 rupees? Is it in today's term? Okay, in today's term, is this 50 going to be the same 50? No, I'm going to get it in 6 months' time. So I need to calculate, step number 2 is I need to calculate the present value of this 50. Of this 50, of this 50, and this. Okay. Today, now in 6 months time, if I'm getting 50, what is its actual value today? To do that, I need to use the time value of money concept. I'm going to discount it. Now I know if I'm going to get 50 rupees in June, that is of a lesser value than the 50 rupees I have today. Okay, so what do? You use this particular formula. So CF is the coupon payment that you identify, which is 50 rupees as per example. And now you are going to use 1 plus R to the power 1, which means now this is 1, the first term. So the power becomes 1. If it's the second term, power becomes 2. Why are we putting the terms there? Because the 50 rupee today is 50 rupees today itself. The value is same. But 6 months down the line, the 50 rupees I'm going to get is not exactly 50 rupee today. It can be only equal to, let's say, 48 or 49. From 1 year's time, if I'm getting a 50, that will be equal to somewhere around 45 today. Okay. Now the value keeps decreasing when the time goes on. Okay. Now let's think about a 50 I'm going to get in 3 years time. I'm wondering whether the 50 rupee note will be even available by then. Okay, so that kind of uncertainty is what time value of money tells you. Now for you to know that, you can use the formula given here. 1 plus R to the power 1. 1 is the 1, 2 and 3, so on are referring to the frequencies. So until n, meaning n is the final coupon, which is the 6th over here in this example. Until the last one, you will calculate it. What is R? R is your required rate of return, which is yield to maturity. In the question, they will give you your rate of return. Using that rate of return, you will discount. Okay. Now, after you discount all this, you will add up and find the total present value of the future coupon payments. Okay. Then step 3. Now we have dealt with one type of a cash flow. Second type of cash flow is face value or the principal repayment. Now, do we need to calculate the principal repayment? No. We know it's already given in the question, or it's given. The par value is quite the same. Usually it's 1000. Okay. So we don't need to calculate it directly. We go to the present value of the face value. Now, face value we are going to get on maturity. Okay. So face value divided by 1 plus R to the power n. Why n? We saw n is the last period in the bonds cash flow. So what is the last period? 6. Why? It's only at the very last that you will get your face value. Correct? So you will use that to find the current value or the present value of the face value. At last, what is step 4? Now you will add the results from step 2 and add the results from step 3 you will get the bond value as of today. Okay. Then you will directly get the price of the bond. Now here there is a practice question for you. I want you to try it. Present value of a 5% annual coupon bond. So they have given you the coupon rate. They have given you the face value. 5 years to maturity, and the investor expects 6% as the return. Okay, so yield to maturity. So first you need to calculate so the first step would ideally be first step is for you to calculate the coupon payment. So you have, how do you find the coupon payment? You have 1000 par value into coupon rate 5% into 1 divided by coupon frequency. Here it is annual, therefore it's going to be 1. So every year I will get 50 rupees as my coupon. Now I know that. Step 2 is this. I need to find the present value of each coupon payment. So 50 divided by 1 plus R. The second would be 50 divided by 1 plus R is how much? R is the yield to maturity. Now, why am I using yield to maturity here? I am using the entire cash flow until maturity. Okay, until the bond matures, all the cash flows I'm taking into consideration. Therefore, I have to use the yield to maturity rate, which is 6%. So I will use 6% here. The power is going to be the relative coupon payment or the coupon period. Now here, how many coupon periods are there? Every year you are paid the coupon. Therefore, 5 is your coupon period. If 5 times you are paid your coupon. Therefore, 1. Then the next payment term, you will have 51 plus 6% to the power 2, like here. And then power 3, power 4 and power 5. This is step number 2. What is step number 3? Do I need to calculate my face value? No, I need to directly calculate the present value of the face value. So I know it's 1000. So this becomes step 3. Divided by 1 plus R to the power n. What was n? N is the last period in which you are getting your coupon, or in which you are getting your final cash flow of the bond. Here it is 5. So to the power 5 will get you the present value of the face value. What is step number 4? Simply step number 2 and step number 3 is added all together. I will get the price of this bond at 957.88. Okay, that is the value of the bond today. Now, why do we need to know the value of the bond? I told you before as well, so that you can see whether the bond is undervalued, whether it's overvalued or correctly priced. That is your intention, for you to know the real price of this bond. Okay, so the present value of future cash flows of the bond, which means from your calculation you get a price, right? That is the present value of the future cash flows of the bond. Now here it is 957.88. Let's say this particular bond is currently being traded in the market. It is being traded at 1000 rupees. Now you know the real value of this bond is 957 rupees only, 958 rupees, let's say. But it's getting traded at a much higher price. As a potential buyer, is it recommended for you to buy? No, it's overvalued. So you shouldn't buy this bond. But if you have already invested in this bond, if you already have this bond with you, what should you do? You should immediately sell this bond. Why? It is now going at a higher price than what it should be. The real value is only 958. Now it's going at 1000. Okay. So if the price of the future cash flow of the bond is lower than the market price of the bond, it is overvalued, which means you shouldn't buy it or you shouldn't have it in your portfolio. And if you do, if you're holding it, you should immediately sell this bond. Okay. Let's say this particular bond is getting traded in the market at 700 rupees. The real value of the bond is 957.88, but in the market it is available for 700 rupees. Isn't it lucrative? Actual price is 957, but from the market I can buy this for 700 for a very low price. Then it is an undervalued bond. Others in the market don't know the real price of this. It's going at a much lower price than its real worth. Okay. Then when the present value of the future cash flows is higher than the current market price, 957 compared with 700, then it is undervalued, which means if you do not have it in your portfolio, you should buy it. Okay. If you already have it in your portfolio, you should continue to hold it. Why? Still the market price has not increased to its real price. Okay. And you shouldn't sell it. If you have it, you shouldn't sell it in the current market price. Why? The current market price is an undervalued price. Okay. What is the final type? You have the correctly priced bond. When the present value of the cash flow is equal to the market price of the bond, which means it is in the same price that it is being traded in the market. So here you can purchase it or you can even continue to hold. It is correctly priced. There is no any chance for you to get an additional return. Okay. So that's how, using that information, you make this decision. Okay. Now, before we wind up, as a homework or as a practice, I want you to try out the September 2019 question. I'm not particularly sure about the question number, but if you have the question paper with you, please try this. I think it was question number 2 of this paper. Here you can practice the issue price and the accrued interest as well. I want you to try it and let's discuss it in our next class. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. And next week, again, let's start from where we left. Okay. Thank you.